Hey everyone, thanks for joining Brandon DeCruz, myself, Jeff Black, for another episode of Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast. Today, we're going to do body comp assessments. And should you even try to measure your body fat? Because, you got people being like, I'm 8%. I'm like, no, you're not. But anyway, that's a topic that we'll dive into today. But first, let's get into how Mr. DeCruz's week has been. How's the last 7 been, my friend?
Man, I got to give it to you. First and foremost, before I go into my week, let's congratulate Jeff. He's been nailing my last name the last 2 weeks, so I'm proud of you. I had numerous clients, and I also had my mother comment about, "Oh, Jeff got it right this week." So everyone gave you applause, they gave you recognition, and
Thank
we're
you.
we're gonna acknowledge that. So I'm proud of you, Jeff. I know that you have a limit to your names, but it's nice that one of your closest friends is within that circle. You know, but
God, you're such a passive aggressive asshole, but that's like why I love you. It's like I'm
absolutely.
like, I'll let you spit roast me on this one. That one's fine. Like I'll own it. Fair.
Let's do it. All right. So honestly, I've had an incredible week. It's always hard for me to recap my week because you and I have like a 15-minute like pre-show like wrap up where we talk about this already. But one thing I didn't hit on with you was this past week I actually traveled up to Long Island, New York to a really well-equipped gym called ProFit. And it was to visit one of my pro clients, Anthony Scalza, who's in prep for our next competitive season IFBB Pro shows. And you know Anthony. Anthony is who comes out and he saw me at the PC. He's a huge supporter of mine. And he's someone that I've been working with for over 2 years as a client. And then he's also within my active mentorship currently. So it was great to see him in person. It was great to catch up. And then also we did both an in-person training session where I ran him through the ropes. And then we also did an in-person mentorship, which is not something I've been able to do with any of my mentees because my mentees are all over the country. So some are in Arizona, some are in California. Some are based in the Northeast, but it's very far from where I'm at, like Pittsburgh and areas like that. And then I also have a few that are overseas, so Australia and New Zealand. So it's not like we get to get in person with each other. So it's always nice to get off Zoom, just like when you and I link up. It's always like we see each other weekly, we talk on an almost daily basis, but there's something different about in-person communication and engagement. And that's something that I miss because in today's culture, everything's like online. It's all through social media, through phone, through Zoom, and those have great benefits. But it's really nice to get in person with people, get your hands on them because I come from a personal training background, as you very well know. So it's nice to see things in person and really show someone rather than just do a Loom video or send them, a text, or whatever it may be. So this was actually our first full prep we're doing together because in 2022 we did a photo shoot prep, which ended up going into like a shotgun prep where we only prepped for 8 weeks, but we got on stage twice within pro shows. So this year we're doing a full prep. So he's about halfway through the prep currently, and we are 6 weeks out from his next pro show, which I'm really excited about. So he's been, honestly, I got to say he's made massive improvements, not only from like a physique standpoint, but also from like a mindset when it comes to dieting. And that is something I really try to focus on with my clients. I always say we cannot separate psychology from physiology. And I find that a lot of times there's multiple stopgaps in the system or bottlenecks that clients deal with, but oftentimes it's their mentality. And I'm sure you can attest to this, like whether it's a lifestyle client where they have a self-limiting belief. And I think this is, I don't want to say I know this is why we cover so many of the topics we do. It's not just about going into the depths of physiology, like how the body works, how fat loss works, mobilization, lipolysis, and all these different things. It's also about like, what is your mindset within the diet or going into the diet? Do you have self-limiting beliefs around your potential or your ability to complete this? Because regardless of what you do physically, if you're not there mentally, the body follows the brain. So I'm very big on that. And honestly, Anthony has executed, incredibly well. I'm super proud of him as an athlete, as a client, and as a man. So it was great to see him in person. We also got he's doing a prep series this year, and this is something that I've been encouraging him to do for years because the kid's great on camera. He just doesn't like doing it. Like it's just something it's outside of his comfort zone, and very much I'm the same way. So I understand this completely. I mean, Jeff can attest to the fact that he had to drag me onto Zoom to do these, YouTube versions of our podcast because it's just not my forte, or it's not my preference rather. And so, I had encouraged him last time to do, a prep series where he documented what he was doing because, regardless, he's got a great social media following, but not even for that, but just for him to have the memory of like just seeing how he's progressed over the years. And that's something that I wish I did when I competed. And so he actually called up two of his videographers, two talented guys. I want to give a shout out to Justin and Joey, and they both came out and filmed us, so we were able to get, me and him training together. I gave an explanation of how we're going through this prep, what my mindset is in terms of our approach, how he's progressing, what the next steps are. So it's something that we're going to be able to look back on in years and see that progress, see where we were at this point in the prep, and then reflect on as we move forward. So it was a great week overall. Great to see him, and just another great week in the books, man. How about yourself?
What were Justin and Joey's last name?
Justin is Sensei or Sinest. It's really hard to pronounce, to be honest with you. And Joey is Camerata. And this is the first time I ever met Joey, so I got both of their last names. Shout out to both of them.
All right, I can give you both. All right. I'm gonna catch you slipping one day, dog. It's happening. You're like, oh. Let's see. My last 7 days ago, I went out and tried a new restaurant Friday. It was really good. I'll have to take you there if you come back in town.
Yeah. Now, is it my style, or can I order like I order?
Maybe ish, but it's really clean. It was super cool. Like, it was just the vibe. Like they gave you the check like in books.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it was I think it's like the Hemingway's Hideaway or something.
Well, it has Hemingway in the name.
Yeah, I know. I'm a Hemingway guy. So I was there.
It's very themed.
Yeah, no, it was cool. But did that. Business has been good, man. So I've actually signed a few people who've been listening to the podcast up. So that's cool that, that those people are connecting with us like that, because it's nice. We don't like sponsors. We don't want to have to go that route. So you all supporting us is something we appreciate. Is though our time to get together and chat. And then let's see, I leave for Austin tomorrow, dude. I'll be honest. I'm gonna probably pop a Xanax before I fly. I hate flying. It's a terrible experience.
Really?
Dude, I'm petrified of it. From you. I am petrified of it.
So I will tell you, so hear me out. I did not fly from the time I was a child, so around 8 years old, until I landed my first corporate job in the supplement industry at 21. So I went 13 years. And the only reason I had to fly was because I had landed the initial interview, and I had my final interview in Georgia. And so they flew me out within 2 days of having that initial interview. So I had like no prep time, nothing. Like I packed up all my stuff, and I was going to be out there for weeks at a time. And I will tell you, I could completely relate to that feeling of anxiety. And I was so unfamiliar with airports. I hadn't been there since I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I used to get like nauseous on planes. And so I was like, this is going to be a terrible experience. But through those years, I traveled up to 75,000 miles a year. So I used to do like 20 to 30 flights a year. So I got super used to it, but it's something that, for every gimme, there's a gotcha, and there's a big benefit to the cost you're paying of discomfort. So just keep that in mind.
I know. Well, I'm leaving tomorrow at 5:10. I get there like at 7:05. And so I rented a car. So I'm just going to drive around and see Austin, and everything kicks off like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It looks like my brain will be mush. So just doing, like I said, at the worst case,
you're nervous about the flight, but are you excited for the process?
I'm excited for the process. Yeah, no, like I'm intrigued to see like what they talk about, what they do, what they teach, and stuff like that, because it's, they like me and you've talked offline about it. I sent you like a few articles discussing it and stuff like that. It's really like the equivalent of like going for like a PhD, because it's like some really deep focused work. I mean, you can figure by the time February runs around, I've done from February to August, I did 72,000 words. I clocked an insane number out, and I've got like, once I go down there, I've still got a year to write the book. Like it has to be turned in years. So I've got plenty of time to really crank out something good, something in depth. So the initial feedback on some of the chapters I've sent out to people that I've like edited, which only like 3 have been like really great. Even Stephen Pressfield has been like, this is some good stuff. So like, I'm just intrigued to see like how it can make me better, or what I could take away from that. Because the worst case is maybe I could learn some stuff in there, and then with what I know, put it into like a writing class for the fitness industry and record it once and just sell it, make it cheap. So, because that's one thing, like, people are connecting through video, but a lot of people like to read what you write in the video too. And it's like 2 different ways. And I think a lot of people are that way. As long as you
I actually find, sweet. And I don't know if you share this ideology or this mindset, but I find that a lot of people, they only have one medium that they're good at. And although I can relate to that, When I write, I've been able to write in pretty high level magazines, whether it be Men's Fitness, Muscular Development, other publications. I just got featured on Alan Aragon's research review. Writing is difficult for me, but when I put my time and effort, and the reason it's difficult for me is because I have attention deficit disorder. So for me to sit down and really focus intently on that, I need to be in a tunnel vision. Whereas when I speak, unless you kind of veer me off and I start going down this rabbit hole, if we stay on topic, which is why we always have topics, brought up on the board before we do the podcast, I'm able to dive into topics and really stay on point as long as I'm fixated and focused on that one thing. And with the spoken word, I'm good with the written word. I can make good quality content or quality writing, but it takes a lot more time, effort, and energy for me to do because it's just not my forte. Something, I have to put a lot of attention to. But when you can master both, that's where you really stand out. So for instance, I did a series of presentations at bodybuilding.com a few years ago for one of the positions I had. And then after that, due to my ability to speak and present, they asked me to write for their publication and be a contributing editor. And so that was a huge opportunity. I got to write, whether it be programs or nutritional articles, and it gave me a huge platform to leverage and to put out more evidence-based content. And so it was, being able to transfer those skills. But a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people, they don't even do either or they don't even try. They don't get on podcasts. They don't, do any type of videos. They don't, write long form content. They do like these quick little motivational quotes and that's it. You know what I mean? And it's not enough, not that everyone wants to read in depth, but I find that it's, today's society with a short attention span, it's almost like a hidden or a forgotten skill.
Yeah, no. I'm pretty confident with it. I'm going to take off the week of Thanksgiving because it's a slow week. And I'll write those mornings. And so I'll be able to get some extra stuff done here and there along the way. My goal is to have it done by the end of the year.
Oh, and I have no doubt that you will, because you always set like these goals, like you mentioned on, I prompted you last week. You had a stretch goal of, I believe it was 60,000 words, and you by far smashed that. So, I think you're giving yourself till December or till January, but it's going to be complete before then. And then you'll just keep refining the process.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I plan on doing. But my buddy was talking to me and he's like, you think this will be your only book? I'm like, man, I've really enjoyed it. Me and my friend Robo, who you've not met, but next time you come down, you'll have to. He's like brilliant business mind. Like I run a lot of offensive ideas. I have business off of him. Like I was telling you how like I've retained an extra 1K a month in my coaching by just creating different plans to be able to maximize retention of clients who want to keep going. Cause there comes a point that you fix people and they just want to have the accountability and just have you as someone they can keep learning from and get nuggets and go through different phases and grow. But nonetheless, like it's I kind of lost my train of thought with all that stuff because it's like been like an experience, like as I sit back and like I think about it, like I was telling Robo, like the part of me wants to really write the crazy history stuff. That's where I was going with it. Want to write the crazy history stuff, but at the same time, it's a taxing process. Like it was insanely taxing to get to 72,000. And I see what writer's block really is. It's quitting. It's no different than a prep when you're like in those last 4 weeks and you're like, fuck, like, you know what I mean?
That's what I call the digging phase.
Yeah. It's a
make or break.
Yeah. I'm at this probably 60-70% done. So I'm digging the shit out of it. And so that's what I think it is, but I don't know. Who knows? But nonetheless, it's been a really good experience. And I would encourage you, Brandon, to write a book too one day.
Absolutely. Definitely a different, I don't think I would do the memoir aspect, but honestly, I consult with Alan Aragon at this point, and that's something I would definitely be interested in, putting out something, whether it be nutrition based, training based, coaching based, something like that. I would definitely look into doing later on down the road, just, to have something that I could put out and it will always be there. You know what I mean? Regardless, it's part of, this is going to be, like I mentioned to you personally, this is going to be part of your legacy for your boys, but also for your family history. So, it's an exciting process to say the least.
That'd be cool as hell, man. I'm interested to say I got done. All right, now let's get into this. So let's talk about different body comp assessments, body fat testing. So like, dear Lord, you have the BODPOD Dexa, you got skin calipers, you've got, I don't know, my personal favorite, taking pictures at the same place, the sun in the same light at the same time, to even measurements that sometimes people use along with perhaps, scales when they're trying to make assessments of things like that in terms of body composition. So there's really a lot of different tools with it. And today we wanted to go down through kind of like a breakdown of each topic of the popular body composition assessment method, and then talk about the different body fat testing. So, Brandon, I want to turn it to you on that one. So, when we were chatting, like on the back end of stuff, there's a lot of people who put a lot of weight in this stuff, and it gets to be where it's almost moderately confusing for them because they don't know what to believe, what to do. And there's all these different tests, and you can go do literally line them up and go right down the line, and you'd get right down the line different measurements.
Absolutely.
Above and beyond. So we really want to talk about this because a lot of people always ask, like, how do you assess body fat? Like, what are some tools and all that? I think that these serve a purpose if you understand tracking trends and things like that, but there's not really a superior one, as you guys are going to come to find out and chat about along the way, perhaps. Or maybe you're going to find the ways that are the best way to be able to say, hey, this is your body fat. Voila. So with that being said, B, I'll turn it to you.
Absolutely. So, the reason we're covering this, guys, this week is because the last two episodes of the podcast, we covered the topics of, body fat set point, body fat settling point. And then last week we did how to regulate your body composition and maintain a lower body fat level by increasing your NEAT and your physical activity levels in order to maintain a high energy flex lifestyle. So we both thought it would only be fitting that we cover the topic of body composition assessments, and specifically the topic of body fat measurements, and whether you should even bother with having your body fat measured. Because honestly, this is a conversation I find myself having more and more with my own clients, as social media has made it so that everyone is in a competition with one another, where they feel they need to walk around looking shredded and then reach a specific body fat percentage during a fat loss phase, because that's the body fat percentage that their favorite influencer or athlete claims to be. And before we even get into the topic of measuring body fat, I think it's really important to point out the fact that I'm referring to these specifically as body composition assessments, as these are methods of assessing our body composition. They're actually not measurements. And none of these devices can actually accurately, directly measure our body fat and provide us with an exact and accurate body fat percentage. What these methods do is they use an algorithm or a formula as a predictive equation to predict or to estimate our body fat levels. So they're very similar in concept, if you guys think about it, to a calorie calculator, which we covered with the errors within that, within one of our first episodes, actually. And these are simply a guided guess that is not accurate, which is the first thing I point out to my own clients who have used these devices and methods, as one of the biggest misconceptions that many have is that body composition assessments are accurate, when really they're just a rough estimate. And so we want to take the readings they provide us with a grain of salt, and no one should be living or dying by the numbers that they provide us with. So in reality, the only time we could actually get, this is actually funny, a lot of people don't realize this, is the only way that we could actually get an accurate reading of our body fat levels done would be to sacrifice our bodies to science. We need to get a cadaver dissection, as that's the only way to truly measure our body fat. So most of these body comp assessments we can access are only what are called two compartment models, meaning they break down the assessment into two compartments, which are our fat mass and then our fat-free mass. So basically how this looks is we have fat mass, which, fat tissue, and then we also have fat-free mass, and pretty much fat-free mass is anything that isn't fat mass. So that's going to include your muscle, but that's also going to include your water content, your minerals, your protein content, glycogen, organs, bone mineral content. And it's important to note this, as often someone will discuss, they'll see a decrease in fat-free mass on one of these assessments, and they'll interpret that as a loss of muscle, but that actually isn't the case. So in today's episode, we're going to break down all the popular methods of assessing body composition and go through each of the most popular. So we can't go through every single one, but we're going to essentially go through the three main body composition assessments that many of us will either have used in the past, I'll tell you I have, or that we'll have access to, or at least you guys will be familiar with. So these are going to include the BIA, the Dexa, and the BODPOD. And now each of these body composition assessments are essentially measuring another metric and then trying to estimate body fat percentage based off of these indirect measurements. So none of these, like I mentioned before, none of these directly measure our actual body fat percentage. They take indirect measurements and then use them to predict our body fat percentage. But due to not being a direct measure, there's a margin of error in all of these assessments, as you'll see when we go through each body composition assessment. So the issue isn't that these measures have a large margin of error, as nothing's perfect. but more so that the error margin is much larger than many expect. So many rely too heavily on the number these machines spit out, which is why it's beneficial to realize that if you're going to use these or have used these in the past, they're going to be inaccurate. So, Jeff, what do you think we should go through first? I mean, I generally see BIA as the most popular and most widely used, but we can go over
Yeah,
whatever three that you want
nah,
to.
I think you hit BIA first because of, you're talking to people, those are the ones who are stepping on scales and getting their body fat. The people who are using the grip held devices, which, these things you just can never get the same. I mean, I don't know. I even have like the scale that tracks it with the app. And it's crazy. Like when I was doing my prep, it said I lost like a ton of muscle, but it was very evident in my before and after pictures
That you didn't lose
that
any
I didn't
tissue
lose
whatsoever.
shit. So I was just like, all right, well, that was slightly inaccurate, But I think
What's
for
good
some
about what's good about
people,
someone like you or I is that we have a lot of experience and we know what our body composition has looked previously and like how much muscle we should be retaining during a prep.
yeah,
But for a lot of people, I think the misconception is they don't know what they're supposed to look like in a dieting phase. They don't know whether they've lost glycogen content, whether they've lost muscle tissue, or they lost fat mass. So they put a lot of weight in these estimations and into these assessments, and then they kind of get mind fucked by if they saw what you saw in terms of a large loss in fat-free mass, they would take that as something's wrong within their diet, which it could be. But if they're taking a really intellectual, evidence-based approach, they're having high protein, they're resistance training regularly, they're using a modest deficit, they're most likely retaining all their muscle mass, as we see with like what we went over with Bill Campbell or some of our other guests. Yet this body composition assessment's telling them the exact opposite.
yeah. And I think that's where it's like, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I'm going to give a little shout out, but optimal physique development. Joe Jeffrey and Austin. It was something that, Joe was doing with this guy. He was like, it was over a pound a day was being lost. And like, talk about the overall deficit. I was just like, holy hell, you know what I mean? But like, you have some of that. And then I was like, I wonder what the body fat like of that would be. Like my mind just immediately was peaked and went down that. But I think for the, you're talking about like high end crazy stuff, but let's bring it back inside. So let's get back to the BIA. I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was so crazy. Like I've been thinking about it all morning long. I'm like,
Yeah,
if
so
like
Joe,
4 weeks are going to be awful, like he's right, then you might as shotgun it and see. I was like, I might try it when
yeah,
I come back from Austin.
he's a big fan of rapid fat loss protocols, which we can get Joe on the show. Joe's been a mentor of mine for years.
Oh,
We have
yeah.
different approaches, but it is, I like taking what I call, I guess, a descending approach essentially to fat loss. It's kind of like I describe it to my clients as dynamic. We start off quicker rate of loss, larger net deficit because you have more body fat, you have more calories to play with, and less likelihood for muscle loss. And then throughout the course, if someone gets leaner, I slow down that deficit, I slow down that rate of loss to preserve muscle tissue. But we have to look at enhanced versus non enhanced. And Joe's really working on the enhanced side for the most part.
Yeah.
And so he's putting things in there, as a stopgaps essentially. And so he's able to run these rapid fat loss protocols very successfully. And he's got very interesting approaches to them. So we could definitely get him on to talk about them.
Yeah, no. And I only bring that up because, like my mind immediately goes to you, what you said, you're talking about your eyes and getting trained for it. A lot of like average Joes, average Shans, just even a lot of competitors, like they think they're lean. I'm like you're wide receiver lean. You know what I mean? But you're not like skinless, dug the fuck in lean. And like, you can just tell by someone's mood because it's just awful to get your body fat down that low. And I always tell people, like, if that scale like 6%, like you wouldn't be having the quality of life you have, nor the Bud Lights that you're having either. Just saying it's truthful.
As I always say, for every gimme there's a gotcha, and there is a sacrifice to getting shredded.
Yep, absolutely. But that being said, let's go into the BIA one first, though, the
Absolutely.
bioimpedance.
So BIA is essentially, it stands for bioelectrical impedance analysis. I always mess that up. However, it's a 2-compartment model. So it's like what I was referring to before, where this device basically passes a current through you to measure the resistance to the current, which they then use to predict your level of fat mass and your level of fat-free mass. And the idea behind this is that our fat mass and our fat-free mass have different contents of water, so they conduct electricity differently. So with fat mass, we have very little water in it, so it doesn't conduct electricity well. So it'll be more resistant to the current on the machine. Whereas with fat-free mass, it has a high water content, especially within our muscles, which are made up of approximately 75% water. So it's going to conduct electricity well. So basically, the less resistance or impedance the machine detects coming from the areas it passes through, or passes the current through, the less fat mass it registers. Now, it should be noted here that BIA, in both my experience and then also when I looked over the research on this, is probably the most susceptible to errors due to how sensitive it is to changes in hydration. So the measurements can be thrown off by your hydration status. So how much you drank or how little you drank that day. Any exercise done
Mm-hmm.
in the days leading up to it, as exercise can lead to changes both in hydration levels. So it could dehydrate you. So say you use the BIA scale at the gym after a workout, you could be dehydrated, or just the shifts in fluid that come from muscle damage and exercise induced edema. This could also be thrown off by your stress levels. So if you have stress induced or cortisol related water retention, your carbohydrate intake, because that's going to pull with it water into the cell. So that's going to throw off the BIA device, and just changes in fluid balance from the menstrual cycle, as well as even the temperature outside. So if you are sweating prior to getting to the test, you're out in Texas, you're out in Tennessee, whatever it may be, and you're the morning of the test, you're sweating, you're changing, your moisture content of your body, it's going to throw off the device. So the other thing with this is some of the BIA devices miss entire sections of our body and only give measurements that are reflective of part of our body. So this is the great example of this is the Omron. If you guys have ever been to a commercial gym, that's a handheld device you kind of hold out. I know Jeff is familiar with it.
Yeah, that was the offense they used to run at Gold's Gym and Urban Active. They used to make like knowing that most people are dehydrated walking in the door, and like just give them the BIA, and it would be like, oh, you're 47% body fat with like BMI, like near death. And then that was an easy way to kind of get them before they start working out to be like, I'm gonna die. I better sign up. You know what I mean? It was the psychology of the sale, but yeah, those are really
No,
popular in
absolutely.
gyms. No,
But
they're
but
huge in
here's
the
the
gyms.
issue with that. That's only measuring your upper body
Yeah,
because
no,
it doesn't the
100%.
current doesn't get passed through your legs. And then on the opposite side of that, if you use one of those at-home scales like you were referring to that claim to measure body fat, they only have those foot sensors. So if you don't have the arm sensors as well, they're only going to be able to send a current through one leg to the other. So it's missing a large portion of the body because you're not
Yep.
getting an upper body measurement. And it's also been shown that with the electrical current itself, it'll actually follow the path of least resistance. So it can actually leave large amounts of fat, underneath the skin to not be picked up on as the current works through other tissues that have more water in them. Because think about it, fat-free mass or muscle content is going to have more water in it. So the electrical current is going to predominantly travel through those tissues. You might miss some fat out. So when we actually look at the error rates of BIA, on an individual body fat percentage level, we see some research shows that they could be off by 8 to 15 or 8 to 13% for us as individuals. And then when it comes to, so that's in an individual time point. One person, Jeff goes to get a testing, he could be 8 to 13% off. Now, when it comes to tracking changes in body fat over time with BIA, we see error rates of up to 8 to 12%. Now, some studies
Mm-hmm.
report a standard estimation error that's lower, and it's between 2.7 and 6.3. But this is dependent on whether you followed all the pre-testing standardization guidelines. So this is literally the minimum error that we could expect to see on average. But if you were to just go get one of these done, without the standardization methods, like if especially within the hydration component, if you just went before or after the gym, you didn't follow all the pre-testing guidelines, you could see errors of up to 8 to 13% body fat. And the issue with these errors is that many BIA devices, like the body weight scales, are utilizing them on a frequent basis during a fat loss diet, it could be really thrown off because it's really susceptible to errors over time. So say that you lost 4% body fat over the course of 2 months of dieting. Well, the error margin of this device is larger than the amount that you actually lost. So you could have went from a true 16% body fat to a true 12% body fat, but the device could register you as being 20%, after those 2 months of fat loss, despite being leaner than you were when you started at 16% because of this 8%, average
Yeah.
error margin. So right then and there, we see that it's not a great service to be using, especially if you're not going to standardize it. And standardizing it would essentially be going in fasted with your bowel, a bowel movement in the morning, bladder completely empty, no water, no nothing. And then they would also pre-test you, like in the research, when I was looking into this, when they do this in laboratory settings, they have someone completely fasted. They're 8 to 12 hours fasted. They have them, sleep a certain amount of hours, their hydration level. Then they check their hydration level when they get to the lab to make sure it's standardized. Because if they're over or under, they need to equilibrate that person's hydration status to not throw off the test. Now, if you're going to your normal nutrition shop, I know these are in a lot of gyms, a lot of nutrition shops, you're not doing that. You're probably not even fasting. You're probably having fluids in the morning, your normal coffee, you're driving, whatever. And so there's so many things that could throw these machines off that it's really hard to get not only an accurate estimate in one time point, but especially if you're doing it over the course of days, you have to, over the course of time. So it's not the most reliable, to say the least. The next one we can go through is the BODPOD.
Yeah,
and
I've never done the BODPOD.
So BODPOD I haven't used as well. They don't have a lot in New Jersey. So
yeah,
this is something that I don't have here big access to. But essentially, for those that know, I do have some clients that have used the BODPOD, so I did want to cover it. But the BODPOD is another two-compartment model that looks at how much air is displaced in the pod. And these devices have a good amount of margin of error due to measuring air. So for instance, if you have to go into the device, anyone that's done it knows it's a bitch. You basically have to fully exhale all the air in your lungs. But if you don't get every single thing out, that could throw off the measurement. And even just things that could hold on to air. So for instance, in one of the case studies I looked at, they saw a large error margin. You know what it was from, Jeff?
No.
I just pointed to it.
Oh, beard?
From someone having a beard, from facial hair. So it's like things like that we would never think of. Like, I don't know about you. I'm not shaving my beard to go get a body fat percentage done.
No,
this is part of my look.
I would shave it down to a sweet stash. I think I'm actually going to rock a mustache in November.
Oh, Lord. All right. Well, we'll see.
All right. Well, fair. But anyway, so you got to shave your beard off if you're a dude. That sucks.
Yeah. And there was other factors, like, for instance, the level of moisture, like if you sweat in the pod, that'll throw off the test. Your body temperature can throw off the test. How tight or loose the bathing suit or the clothing you wear inside the test. So like within all these things, like you have to start compounding these errors, because if you just, if you don't get every single one checked off, you are leaving yourself predisposed to getting an inaccurate estimate. And so when we look at the error margins with the BODPOD on a population level, these actually do pretty well. So they have an average error margin of 2 to 5.3%. But what I mean on the population level, meaning when they're done in a research study and they're looking at large amounts of individuals, they're going to have people overestimated and underestimated. So when we look at the means or the average, they pull each other towards the middle. You know what I mean? So they see smaller average errors. However, when we look at the individual level, like if I were to get it done or you were to get it done or anyone in our audience were to get it done, we could see anywhere between an 8 to 15% estimation error. So it could be 8 to 15% off what our actual body fat percentage is.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So it's substantial. And then the last one we have is the Dexa. And Dexa stands for dual X-ray or dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. And unlike BIA and Dexa, or BIA and BODPOD that we just covered, Dexa is what's called the 3-compartment model. So we're looking at bone mineral content, which is something that the other two don't include or don't look at. We have fat mass and we have fat-free mass. Now, what I'm sure everyone in the audience has heard, I know you've heard it, Jeff, we always hear people refer to the Dexa as the gold standard. But I think, I'm trying to provide clarity on this because I think they confuse this with meaning it's the gold standard for measuring body composition, when in actuality, Dexa is the gold standard when it comes to measuring bone mineral content, because that's what this was designed for. So this test would be good for like females who are going through or have already gone through menopause. However, there are other drawbacks to Dexa. First of all, it's expensive to get done regularly. I've looked into it. It's in New Jersey, it's $80 to $100. And also depending on the state, and specifically in New Jersey, it's highly regulated. So you have to have a technician that has a license and all these different things. It can't just be a gym that gets the Dexa. It can't just be a fitness center or a high-level sports complex. They have to have someone that's board certified, usually has to have a doctorate. This is depending state to state. I know in Pennsylvania it's a little bit different because I have had clients do it out there, but it's a big expense, $100+ just to get this done. And then also something that people do highlight. I don't think it's a huge deal, but for those that are in concern, it is an X-ray. So we have to think about the fact that there is going to be a small dose of radiation with this. So this might concern some individuals. But also when it comes to error margin, a lot of times we'll get different readings from different machines and manufacturers, even if they're taken on the same day and in the same standardized conditions. As if you look at Dexa and you look at the different brands, different manufacturers use different types of algorithms. So literally they had research studies that I was looking at where they took people and they had different Dexa machines within a facility, within a research lab. And they literally took people in the same standardized conditions, same hydration status, same clothing, same everything, and put them in one Dexa, had them go through the x-ray, got the measurement. Then they had them go 5 minutes later to the next and saw, margins of error. So if you were to use this, and this is kind of like the most popular one, and if someone asked me, listen, I have access to anyone, cost and budget is not a concern, what would you recommend? It would be Dexa. If they couldn't get access to anything higher grade, which we can go into, but the others are honestly not reliable, or they are better, but they're not accessible unless you're at a research facility. And so if someone had access to a Dexa, what I would suggest, and we see this in the literature as well, is that you use the same machine from the same manufacturer and go in under the same standardized conditions every time. So don't veer off the beaten path and decide to go to one and then you get a Groupon coupon, you go to another. You're gonna have inaccurate measure. No, I know a lot of people that do that, and so it's gonna have a large margin of error. And the thing is with Dexa, this is another body composition assessment that can be thrown off by a couple of variables. So one of the biggest ones is our hydration levels. And we see that even just acute changes in water and electrolyte intake can impact our hydration status, which will influence the fat-free mass readings that these machines get. So there was actually a study that I looked at by, I believe it was Pryor, that showed that even just a 5% variation in hydration levels of fat-free mass can alter the body fat readings Dexa provides by 3%. So that could compound the margin of error by 3%. But when we really look at it in terms of error rates and stuff like that, the average error rates across the population with Dexa are between 0.4 to 5.3. So it's on a population level, most accurate that we're going to have access to. Then when it comes to the individual level, it's as high as 6 to 10, but a lot of research studies showed between 3 and 5. So that's why I said, if we're going to utilize one, it's probably the best option is going to be Dexa. But you have to, we'll go into whether people even should, and also, the dieting, how that aspect impacts things. And, we'll go more into nuances a little bit later in this podcast.
Well, actually, it's up for us next to talk about. It's a good question. Does dieting impact body comp assessment readings? Does it matter what phase you're in? If you're in a muscle building phase, if you're here, if you're there, like what does anything really matter with these devices when you're going through them or using them, I guess, as a tool?
No, absolutely. So what I find most common is that people utilize these during dieting phases. They really want to know, because we're talking about body fat percentage in particular, a lot of times people will use this as a method of tracking their progress. They want to see, what is my body fat percentage? It's always, no one wants to know their body fat percentage in an off season or in a building phase. Let's be real. But during a fat loss phase where they're getting leaner, they're seeing some ab veins, they want to see this. And I understand, because I've been there and I've paid for these tests and I've went through it before I was aware of the research years ago. And honestly, I had thrown off the test one time. I did back-to-back assessments, and then I saw the margin of error, and that's where it really woke me up and I started digging into the research. But that's a story for another day. But even if you just started a fat loss phase, it can impact our body composition analysis and results. So say you got an initial body comp assessment in your building phase. So you're in a surplus, you're having a high carbohydrate intake, and then you went into a fat loss phase for a month, where you reduce not only your calorie intake, but you also reduce your carbohydrate intake to induce an energy deficit. Now, over the course of that month, you lost some fat while maintaining all your muscles. So the first month of dieting, 9 out of 10 people, they do it correctly, they're not going to lose any muscle mass. But you've reduced your calorie intake and you've also reduced your carbohydrate intake. So you've actually lost some glycogen content, as we know that glycogen or carbohydrates are stored as glycogen, both in our muscles and liver, both of which register as fat-free mass. So if you were to lose those and you just decrease your carbohydrate intake, even if it's for a day, and you are to deplete a little bit of liver or muscle glycogen, it's going to register as a fat-free mass loss. So you could have lost, you lost 1 pound per week, you lost 4 pounds in that month, 2 of which came from fat and 2 of which came from glycogen and the associated water with it. But the body comp assessment will generally register that as a loss of 2 pounds of fat mass and 2 pounds of fat-free mass loss, which many will interpret as a loss in muscle tissue when they haven't lost any muscle at all. They've literally only lost muscle glycogen. And so even if you went for this test earlier in the fat loss phase, like say during week 1, so you're only a few days into dieting, you just got into a deficit, you're going to lose glycogen content and the water associated with storing that glycogen due to the decrease in carbohydrate intake, which will cause most body composition assessments to say you've lost fat-free mass, although you're only a few days into dieting. And so it's just due to the shift in water content, as muscle is made up of, approximately 75% water. But because water and glycogen are both components of fat-free mass, it's going to register as a loss. So a lot of people are going to misinterpret this, and it's going to look like they lost less fat than they actually did, and they lost more muscle or fat-free mass than they generally did. So we see that within any changes in carbohydrate intake and thus in glycogen content and fluid content, they'll show up as changes in lean mass. So even if you just deplete your carbs one day and go into test a bit depleted, you'll register as having less fat-free mass. But say you were to carb load, and this is actually the situation that I got in, you'd see that you'd have a higher reading of fat-free mass. So I went in, I had an opportunity to go. I had a friend that had one of these analyses, and he had just bought one. He wanted someone to test it. So he hadn't, it just happened to be, I was in peak week and I was depleted on a Sunday. So I went in depleted on a Sunday. I'm at the height of my dieting phase, very low body fat percentage. And I registered and I had done previous ones. It wasn't at the same testing facility, but it registered that I had lost a lot of fat-free mass. But I went in that Friday prior to the test. It was prior to NPC Universe, when that was still called the Team Universe. So years ago, a national level show. And so I went in that Friday and I was up 8 pounds of fat-free mass, my man. And that was in the morning fasting. And it was just from the carb load. You know what I mean? So it's like, in 5 days, did I really regain 8 pounds of fat-free mass in a deficit? I don't think so. But it was just due to the change in carbohydrate intake. Yeah. And you could even do that. You could literally trick one of these BIA devices. And I've done this as well in nutrition shots, is where, I'll go in early in the morning. I have a friend that owns a chain of nutrition shops, so I have done this as well. I went in early in the morning, fasted, and then I've drank a gallon of water during my workout. I went back in, and a gallon being 128 ounces, that's eight pounds. So it'll register as like 8 or 9 pounds of fat-free mass increase. Yeah. You could, if you were to do a transformation, a 60-day transformation, you really wanted to trick this out, it's like with one of those Nutri-Shops or something, you could fumble this test for sure.
Oh, wow. No. Yeah, no, I tell everyone who does those, I'm like, look, it's a good little baseline, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. Like, you have to do like 8 for it to, like, over a course of time, to like, for it to even kind of make sense. But is there even a way to how to measure body fat even more accurately? Like, is there even things out there that people could be doing? I mean, I personally think if you're going to do it, go get the skinfold, measurement. It's probably about the best one you're going to get all around. I personally think.
Okay, so when it comes to a machine, there is actually a more accurate estimation. Well, we have to keep in mind, all these are estimations. So there's nothing but getting cadaver sliced and, getting opened up that's going to really register your body fat percentage. But if we wanted the most accurate estimation of our body fat percentage, we need to use a whole body assessment, which would be done utilizing a multi-4 compartment model. And if you remember, Bill Campbell kind of hit on this, how he uses a 4 compartment model for a lot of his studies to measure like the increases in fat-free mass or the decreases in fat mass. And this like approach uses what each device is best for and most accurate in. So it'll pull data from like each of these devices that we went over to get the most accurate assessment. So this would be, they would use BODPOD for getting total body volume. They would use, they would find your body water content from an advanced, like lab grade BIA device. Then they'd get the bone mineral content from Dexa, because that's the standard for that. And then it would get body mass from a calibrated scale. And then what they do is they'd use an advanced algorithm to get a better estimation of body fat. But on top of that, if they really want it to be as accurate as possible, and I've seen this in certain lines of study, like Stu Phillips does this with a lot of his studies, they'd use an MRI to assess what was skeletal muscle and what was actually adipose tissue or actually fat tissue. But like, if we actually look into this, think about all these steps we just went through. First, time consuming. B, really expensive. C, all research grade. So you would really need to go to a research lab to do this. So this isn't something that's realistic for any of us unless we enter like one of Bill Campbell's studies. So it's something like, there's a lot of times my clients, when I give them the information about these body fat estimations and, assessments, they say, well, what's the most accurate? Well, the most accurate on a singular level is going to usually be Dexa. However, if you want to get the most accurate, you're going to have to enter a study. You know what I mean? So it's like, right. It's not feasible for many of us. It's very few and far between. I do have one client that was in a study in University of Texas, UT, Austin, and he was able to get a 4 compartment model done at the university. So he got a really accurate estimation over an 8-week time course study, but that was like a one-off thing. It's not something that he's able to go back to again and again unless he was to work for that laboratory. So it's something that, yes, this is the most accurate way to do it, but is it feasible? Not so much.
I think that's what a lot of people got to understand. Like, I don't know. I think that we just put too many things on numbers. The scale says this, the body fat says that, like the measurement says this. And I'm like, okay. And that's why like I like pictures. Like, I mean, everyone's definition of 3% is a little different, but when you can like, see we all know, like just everyone who has been around long enough, you can look at stuff. But most average Joe people, like I said, when guys talk about being lean, I'm like, they mean wide receiver lean. Like, you know what I mean?
That's
Like
the thing,
that's
but you hit on it
them.
right there. So there's oftentimes I see things within my clients. So my check-in process, the first thing that I do anytime a client sends me a check-in is I look at their progress photos from that week, and then I compare it to the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I pull them all up on my computer, and I do that first. And I always tell them, I'm going to look at your photos before I look at anything else. And I take notes on my end, and I try to judge how their progress was and how their week could have potentially gone. So I'm looking for indices of stress, signs of, whether it be visually, like their disposition, how their face is looking, they look tired, how their body looks, they look worn out, if they're water retentive, or if they've shown visible progress in terms of fat loss, looking tighter, more vascular, things of that sort. I always make that assessment so I can get an objective assessment of what they look like rather than reading the subjective feedback in their check-in, both their objective and subjective feedback within the check-in, and then letting that dictate or influence what I see within their photos. And I always tell them, like, there's oftentimes I'll pick up on stuff they didn't even hit on in, like, I'll say, you look really stressed, or maybe, was sleep off, was something going on at work, what's going on, let's dig a little bit deeper. And they're often like, dude, how did you know that? And it's because I've looked at thousands upon thousands of photos. But that's the thing, Jeff, we've both looked at ourselves and others so many times that we have an eye for this. And that's something we can't teach someone. We can't teach that on a podcast. We can discuss that, but it's that coaching eye is something you develop over years in the trenches, working with individuals of all different backgrounds, both competitors, non-competitors, lifestyle clients, people from all different demographics that hold body fat in different areas, that have different predispositions towards stubborn body fat and also leanness. And so that's something we could pick up on over time. But the average person looking at themselves, it's going to be really hard. And that's where coaching comes in, where we're able to give them an objective viewpoint or objective perspective on what we're seeing and what a more accurate estimation of what their body fat percentage would be than the average person would be. And I always say, like, even coaches need coaches, because just like a surgeon doesn't operate on themselves or their kids, it's hard to take out the emotion. So sometimes we're really pushing hard in the dieting phase, and we think we're leaner than we are, and we think, because we're suffering or we're hungry or whatever it may be, and we don't realize, like, listen, if we really want to get to that goal, that 6% that you said or whatever it may be, like, we might have to dig even harder, and we might not want to hear that, or we don't want to see that in the photos, but it's necessary, and it's an objective viewpoint.
100%. So then should we even try to measure our body fat levels?
All right, so when it comes down to it, most of us have the goal of improving our body composition, looking better and feeling better. So I don't really believe in wasting our time and energy trying to find our exact body fat percentage. And I don't find that to be a fruitful investment, especially if you're breaking the bank to try to afford getting these tests done regularly. Because like I mentioned, the most accurate that we have access to is most likely going to be Dexa. And they're going to be expensive. And if that's going to be something that's going to offset, is going to break the bank, I don't find that necessary. And also, if seeing these results are something that you cannot psychologically detach yourself from, and it's something that's going to mess with your psyche, I don't think people should be looking at utilizing them. And when it comes down to it, improving our body composition is all about setting objective goals and then creating habits and a routine to achieve them. And in order to track your progress, having objective measurements of what you're doing and how it's working is important. But I'm sure you can attest to this. I often find that many get caught up on tracking either the wrong markers or ones which are inaccurate. So some examples of this are when people utilize fitness trackers. And I'm a huge into fitness trackers, but often what I'll have people who come to me, what I notice is they utilize their Fitbit or their Apple Watch, their Oura Ring to track calories burned rather than what those devices are actually most accurate at, which are counting steps. So they're not great at, we've went over the research where it's 24 to 93% off in terms of the calorie estimation or calorie burn. And I think the same thing could kind of be applied to these body composition measurement devices. And so believe me, I'm all about tracking data with myself and my clients. But at the same time, what I'm really focused on is utilizing and using the right tool at the right time, and only tracking the data I believe will either improve their results in terms of their body composition, will increase their adherence, better their health, or help their psychology. So the big issue I have with body composition assessments is that they're really inaccurate, like we just went over. So this often results in either getting an over-reporting or under-reporting of these body fat estimates, which I often see clients get too focused and fixated on, which can have a negative effect on their psychology. And then also that's going to have downstream effects on their level of adherence. So if you're someone out there and you're looking to use these devices to accurately see exactly what your body fat percentage is, I would generally suggest not doing so, because they're highly inaccurate. So you're not getting a precise idea of what your body fat is anyway. And when it comes to losing fat and improving our physique, you really should be looking at how your physique looks in photos compared to one another over time, your trends in scale weight over weeks and months, how your clothes fit, and other things, in terms of, how your performance is in the gym and things like that, instead of utilizing one of these devices, because these are inaccurate and they're not things you're going to be able to use regularly for the most part. So you want to track your progress in terms of dropping body fat, not just, looking at these things to be an accurate measurement of that. So really, when it comes down to it, within my own coaching practices, it's something I actually discourage a lot of my clients from investing in, especially if it is a financial investment, because I don't find it necessary nor helpful. And really, when it comes down to it, I always try to explain to them, we can gather all the data we need from comparing their check-in photos week to week, month to month, looking at trends in their average scale weight over time, seeing how their clothes fit, seeing the reception they get from those around them that see them every day. Because a big thing that I find that a lot of people don't realize is we look at ourselves every single day. You think that we're going to pick up on little differences? Yeah, maybe in a contest prep when you're getting really lean, but day to day, we're not going to notice a lot of change in ourselves. It's hard to notice when you look at yourself all the time. However, when you see a friend or family member that hasn't seen you for 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, that's when you get those compliments. Realize that those are more objective. They don't owe you anything, especially if you haven't told them. I often get, I was having a conversation with one of my clients, Corinne, this morning, and she's getting all this feedback from her family. They don't even know she's dieting. She just started the process, 4 to 6 weeks ago. So it's like that type of objective feedback from those around you. That's a good sign. Your performance markers in the gym, how you're training, how you're feeling. Let's rely on that kind of stuff that, yes, they're subjective, but it's not something we're putting all this weight in. And I really discourage anyone, whether, regardless of what measurement or assessment it is, putting too much weight in one single metric. And that's my whole thing. I want to look at, a comprehensive, all-inclusive look at what could be driving progress. Are you nailing the boxes? Are you checking off the daily boxes needed? Are you maintaining a deficit? Are you hitting your steps? Are you training hard in the gym? Are you hitting your protein intake? Are you getting your fluid in? It's all those routines, those that are part of the process that are going to lead to the body composition that you want. Not what the Dexa says, not what the BIA, not what the BODPOD says. So honestly, I don't think we need to measure it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm more of a picture guy. It's what people want to see anyway. I mean, they're not like walking around. I've never had like the number one question I think I probably get is like, how much you bench? You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, I don't even know that answer. Like, people don't walk around and go like, oh, he looks every bit 8.24% body fat. Or she looks like 16.
It has become more prominent within our society and within our industry to ask, what body fat percentage you think. I have clients that ask me all the time, and I'm like, I don't care what body fat percentage you are, because it doesn't matter. B, if you're not getting on stage, no one cares. And even if you were getting on stage, we all distribute body fat differently. So it's honestly, getting lean is required in bodybuilding or in competing. However, a certain body fat percentage isn't the requirement. So we really have to look at other pieces of feedback, biofeedback. Really, at the end of the day, we're trying to look good. So you should look at what you look like without clothes on and with clothes on, because that's how everyone's going to see you day to day. No one cares your body fat percentage, and nor should you. And so we need to stop these comparative analyses where we're comparing, contrasting ourselves with others that we see. And, there's a lot of YouTube influencers and Instagram and all these guys, and they'll put out their body fat readings, or they'll put out what they're, I walk around at 6% all year. And that's all well and good. That sounds good and well. That sounds great. I've been at that level and below, according to these estimations. And so I know I've been skinned out, and so have you. But that doesn't matter. It mattered the process of getting there and what we look like in the mirror and being happy with the progress that we made within that process. It didn't matter what the Dexa, the BODPOD, the BIA, the skin fold caliper, none of what that said. It mattered, how did I look in comparison to where I started and what my goal was? And that's really what we should focus on.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't really died or lived until you dieted the fat off the bottom of your feet. I mean, that's when you know you've hit some new
It just
levels.
hurts. Every step
Yeah,
hurts, man.
yeah,
I remember before my first prep, I didn't understand that. I had gotten lean for photo shoots and stuff. And before my first prep in 2014, I remember reading Dorian Yates. He had his journal that he had published, and he had made a mention of that he knew he was lean when the bottoms of his feet felt raw. And I thought to myself, what does he mean? And it was because the fat pads under there. That's like the last place to go.
mm-hmm.
And I didn't get there the first prep, but by the second or third prep, I felt that feeling. And I was like, wow, I had to get a new pair of shoes. Like I put some insoles in
Yep.
there. It was rough, but hey, it's part of the process.
Yep. Nope. I know exactly how it is as I get deeper in prep. Those last few weeks, like last two, there were certain shoes I just favor over the other ones just because they're more comfortable to walk around in and, holding on to
I
those
think the
things, just
worst
good
is
memories.
I think the worst is when your ass gets skinned out and
Yeah.
you're so lean that it hurts to sit for long periods of time. That's where I know I was, I did a lot of driving throughout my career. And when I was competing, I was usually on the road and it was just like I had to constantly get up. It wasn't even like I should have been happy that I was seated and not moving around the whole time, but it was just like I had no fat there. So it was like there was no cushion.
Yeah.
It was a interesting feeling.
Yeah. I bet. Well, dude, that's all we got for this week. Where can everybody find you at?
Guys, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Brandon DeCruz _ or on my email, which is bdecruzfitness@gmail.com. Also, I just want to thank everyone for the feedback that they give us on a weekly basis. We really do appreciate it, guys. If you like the show, if you listen, please, first of all, subscribe to us. Second, drop us, a comment, a whatever it may be, a share it on your IG profile in your story. We'd really appreciate that. And then any feedback that you guys have, often we cover these type of things, not only because we want to cover them for our own clients, but because we get, listener feedback and then we dive deeper into specific topics that you guys want to hear. So please, if you guys are listening to this point, give us some feedback. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, dude, you have yourself a good week and I'll catch up with you later.
You too. Best of luck out there.
I appreciate it, man. Bye.